Greetings, everyone. This is Leah Love. Welcome back to another video. I am sticking to the same theme, which is understanding the communist socialist agenda for using Black Americans to destroy the fabric of America. Sounds far-fetched, I'm quite sure, but I want you to stay tuned. And for those who are new, welcome to my channel. I am a conservative homemaker and homeschooler and wife, and I really love discussing topics that are near and dear to my heart. I want to be a part of the movement that is uncovering the lies and the deception that's been going on by the leftist-led uh, politics and agenda. And it's really important, particularly for Black people who are in the midst of a huge awakening, and I'm so happy to see it and just want to do my part to spread information. So stay tuned. So I want to introduce you to an individual from Russia who was high up in the KGB. And much like the information that I shared in previous videos about Manning Johnson, a Black man who ended up being taken to Russia to study communism in order to come back to America and exposed Black America to communist values. And he wrote a book in 1959 which totally blew my mind, and it made me do a lot more research. And I found this video of an expert within the KGB who's going to begin to talk about what was the strategy to demoralize America and to use its own people against itself. So let's look at an introduction first.
Mr. Bezmenov was born in 1939 in a suburb of Moscow. He was the son of a high-ranking Soviet Army officer. He was educated in the elite schools inside the Soviet Union and became an expert in Indian culture and Indian languages. He had an outstanding career with Novosti, which was and still is, I should say, the press arm or the press agency of the Soviet Union. It turns out that this is also a front for the KGB. He escaped to the West in 1970 after becoming totally disgusted with the Soviet system, and he did this at great risk to his life. He certainly is one of the world's outstanding experts on the subject of Soviet propaganda and disinformation and active measures.
So now he's going to start breaking down in great detail what we've literally been seeing before our very eyes on the political and social stage of America. It's going to blow your mind, so buckle your seatbelt.
Well, you spoke several times before about ideological subversion. That is a phrase that I'm afraid some Americans don't fully understand. When the Soviets use the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
Ideological subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in four basic stages.
So if you think about it, if you think about what's been happening in the United States over the past, I want to say 50 years, 60 years, we've had the civil rights movement, which was definitely needed. But then through that, we also had the 60s flower power movement. We had the throwing off of morals, traditions. You had people on LSD. You had them, undressing in the streets. You also had the radicalization of the feminist movement, which totally changed was the beginning of changing the family structure. And we're not talking about basic feminine rights. We're talking about the radicalization where we are dealing with Betty Friedan and Simone Beauvoir And then we have all of these popular radical feminists that really began pushing the dissolution of genders, that were dealing with man envy, and really precipitated the war between masculine and feminine, men and women. And that was the burgeoning of that movement during the 60s and 70s. We've seen some of the negative fallout from the pro Black movements, which really militarized Black people into a state of mind, which really was the advent of the victimization, but not from a point of empowerment to say, hey, these things happen to us. We're going to create a new world and a new reality based on sovereignty, but it was more just spitting anger and victimization without real solutions. They did try the Black Panther, but clearly that was a bust. And I know that there was a lot of infiltration of that, a lot of communist ideology going on. And I know the communists had a lot to do with that. The communists were bringing Black leaders to Russia to try to persuade them to be anti American and to follow the socialist route. We have also since then seen the breakdown of the family. We have seen, teen births rising. We've seen out of wedlock births grow exponentially. Then we had the rise of rap music, urban music, which originally was more of a revolutionary type nature, but quickly went into the debauchery that we are now experiencing today, which is hypersexualization, oversexualization. We've got, again, an explosion of baby mamahood, a glorification of violence, a heavy drug culture. We've got stripper culture now, which is being highlighted. We've got the slut movement, the slut walk movement. We've got the Me Too movement, which had, lofty origins, but has turned into this witch hunt of men and without any evidence or personal responsibility on the part of women. And if you follow the progression that I just mentioned, this is what he is speaking about in regards to the demoralization of the population. And once you have begun to demoralize them, they don't have to be taught to do it. They will simply perpetuate it for generations to come. And so, job well done.
The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years, actually it's overfulfilled, because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success.
So we saw him discussing the fact that they work long term. And I think this is really, really important for us to understand here in America, is that people who have had their agendas, they don't just work on 1 or 2 year plans. They're working literally on 40, 50, 100-year plans, even after they have passed. And this is what has been characteristic of the communist movements and of various cycles in political scenes, where they don't just plan for today and tomorrow. They are thinking about long, long term. And so I really love that he mentioned the fact that, they're talking about working through 1 to 2 generations of people, because they understand that if you can capture 1 to 2 generations of children going through a radicalized socialist, communist public school education, well, then you've changed everything. Because once you change people's minds, once you control their mind with indoctrination and brainwash, That's all you have to do. You don't have to do much else. And that's what we've seen in the Black community, is that now that it has been normalized in terms of the babyhood, baby mamahood, baby daddy, marriage isn't important, nuclear family is destroyed. Once you do that in the Black community and you have children growing up in that, they're only going to replicate what they've already known and what they've been brainwashed to believe via the music, via the politics, via family members. And of course, if they are anti family, or family's not important, or family's just not possible, they will literally go out and create their own new generations, their own children, without the buttress of a good family and traditional values, because they've already been taught that that's not necessary. And we are seeing exactly that in the Black community.
Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him.
And this is why mainstream media is able to do what they do with the American population. You have a small group of people who are disseminating propaganda in this country. And nobody is calling it out except for the conservatives or the independents. So you have people believing any nonsense that is put out and repeated over and over and over on all the news networks as a form of brainwash. And you have the consumers who have been already degenerated into a state where they don't trust their own minds, they don't trust their own information. They simply take whatever the mainstream gives them and they run with it. They take whatever their cousin said. But if you were to ask them, for instance, about a particular Trump quote or what have you, they cannot give you the actual source. They cannot give you the circumstance around the comment, but they simply just say, oh, Trump is racist against Mexicans. Trump is busy working to end sex trafficking that's coming through a major route, which is through Mexico into the United States. And he's simply trying to stop that. He did not say all Mexicans, as an example, but he did talk about the high prevalence of rapists and murderers that come through our borders into the United States. There are so many Mexican and Latino people who are Trump supporters. How could they be Trump supporters if they thought that he was racist? So that should tell you something. But the fact that we have a population of people who have to be spoon fed, nonsense information should tell you that the communist program is working.
Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom.
He said, a swift kick in the fat bottom. Wow. But let's be real. We've all seen it with our liberal friends and our liberal family members. They refuse to believe any information that is contrary to what they've been programmed to believe. It is that deep. And so we speak about the, propaganda and the mission to create a dumbed down America. Well, it's already happened. It's already here. And so even in the face of facts, you have a group of people, particularly a large swath of Black people, who refuse to believe any other truths other than what they are committed to believing because it fits their narrative that's already been programmed into them.
When a military boot crashes his balls, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation, what matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas as defense
or the fake COVID pandemic, or BLM.
and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis.
And in the case of George Floyd, it only took a day to create 4 months of absolute mayhem in this country. It was a staged crisis.
You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization.
And so we have literally had 4 months of violence. We have had reporters on the news post-pandemic talking about the new normal, normalizing a new state where the communist China has, done a major operation to destroy the American economy via this Chinese virus, which is COVID, which came out of a Wuhan lab, which a Chinese scientist has now come out and fled from China by threats of death, and she is now admitting and sharing with the world that this was all a planned crisis.
Indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, "Now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized." This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C.
This is exactly what AOC and all of her compadres in the communist struggle have been working for, promising all types of socialist programs, social health care and welfare, and all of these goodies, throwing all of these fake promises in order to create a false sense of security while they build up a socialist America. And this, my friends, is the absolute truth.
With benevolent dictators like Walter Mondale, who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfilled or not. Your leftists in United States, all these professors and all these beautiful civil rights defenders, they are instrumental in the process of the subversion only to destabilize the nation.
And these professors have been working for nearly 40 years. These women's studies, Black studies, Afro-American studies, social minority studies, English professors. It's literally in every single subject matter. And these professors have been working tirelessly, unabashed, in the college system in America, and they have been changing the minds of kids to the point where now we have literal robots, mindless bots out in the streets protesting, screaming. They have been whipped up to such a fanatic level of emotionalism where they believe that we must have a socialist government. I mean, I literally can't believe my eyes when I see this generation of college students who literally want to subvert the government, who want to abolish prisons, defund police, create this utopian space. It's been done time and time again in multiple countries where the people have been uh, in a state of delusion and illusions, pushing for a state of government that once they finally put them in power, they stamp down on them and create hell on earth in those countries. And only the oligarchs and the richest of the rich get the funds and the money and everything funneled to them, and everybody else suffers. And I can't believe these American children are pushing so heavily, so fervently for this.
When their job is completed, they are not needed anymore. They know too much. Some of them, when they get disillusioned, when they see that Marxist-Leninists come to power, obviously they get offended. They think that they will come to power. That will never happen, of course. They will be lined up against the wall and shot.
And that's the problem, because nobody is telling these screaming liberals out in the streets that they will become the first targets once they push their socialist communist leaders into power. They have no idea that they have been used, but we've been telling them ever since. And unfortunately, Black people will fall into the slaughter as well, because you are, after all, cannon fodder, as Manning Johnson shared with you.
But they may turn into the most bitter enemies of Marxist-Leninists when they come to power. And that's what happened in Nicaragua. You remember most of these former Marxist-Leninists were either put to prison or one of them split, and now he's working against Sandinistas. It happened in Grenada when Maurice Bishop was already a Marxist. He was executed by a new Marxist who was more Marxist than this Marxist. Same happened in Afghanistan when first there was Taraki, he was killed by Amin, then Amin was killed by Babrak Karmal with the help of KGB. Same happened in Bangladesh when Mujibur Rahman, very pro-Soviet leftist, was assassinated by his own Marxist-Leninist military comrades. It's the same pattern everywhere. The time bomb is ticking.
And unfortunately, these liberals who think that they are so smart and so brilliant are falling once again for the same pattern and plan to take America with them. But we're not going to let it happen. Thanks you guys for watching yet another video. If you like this information, please share, please subscribe, and please click the notification bell so that you can see more of my content. And if you want more in-depth content that I don't share on this channel, definitely check out my Patreon, which is called The Bus Transfer. If you go to my page, you can read why I chose that name. It's time to get off that plantation. It's time to wake up and transfer onto the bus towards real freedom. This is Leah Love. Follow me on Instagram, same name, Leah Love Online, and I'll see you there. Bye-bye.